Josh Schofield. I'm the head coach and founder of PGC1 Coaching. Initially, kind of started my sporting journey, 8 years old, progressed through running internationally, and then in 2019, set up my own coaching business.
Yep.
The business essentially skyrocketed. COVID hit. Start of COVID, I was kind of like, you follow that kind of rhetoric that the government give of, you know, it's going to be a really tough time for businesses, etc. But actually the complete opposite happened. The business pretty much doubled in size because of COVID.
I've been trying to get under a 20-minute 5K. That was my goal in January. What's your PB at 5K?
14:39.
That's ridiculous speed.
Really proud of everything that I did. I think there was potentially still more things I could have achieved. I didn't want them bad enough to want to keep going out there and doing them. I still am involved in the sport, you know.
You're not doing it,
but I'm not doing it.
I've got an ice bath at home. My daughter works for the company. This will be the second year I've done it now. Is that actually a thing?
I'm going to upset some people.
Before you start this episode, please can you click subscribe below and follow our social handles in the description. It's a massive help and it keeps you up to date with all the exciting announcements from the podcast. Right, Josh, thank you very much for coming in, mate. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Good. Right, I'm going to throw you straight in at the deep end. Same question that we go in with everybody, which is a bit of an intro, really, so the viewers and listeners can kind of get an understanding of what you're about.
Yep.
So I'm going to give you a minute to take me through Josh from start to Josh now.
Okay.
In a minute, if you're up for the challenge.
Perfect.
Yeah. So you crack on.
So I'm Josh Schofield. I'm the head coach and founder of PGC1 Coaching. So initially, kind of started my sporting journey, 8 years old, progressed through running internationally throughout my junior career, and then in 2019, upon graduating uni, set up my own coaching business.
Yep.
And that was to basically get me through my masters, so that I had enough money to get to and from Loughborough.
Yeah.
From there, the business essentially skyrocketed. COVID hit. I put my masters on hold. Went full in the coaching, and then 5 years later I'm sat here as this is my full-time job. Do some work with young athletics as well and some work with young athletes, and I feel like pretty fortunate that I don't have to get a proper job for want of a better word.
Yeah, good. Okay, so why running then, mate? What's the kind of, is it something you've always wanted to do? Is it, you mentioned that you've been interested in athletics and sport and stuff from an early age and stuff, so what was the dream? So
initially I was actually a triathlete, so my dad was into triathlon and he took me down to the triathlon club. I did that, did quite well, won a couple of like Yorkshire titles when I was at primary school, loved it. This was kind of the time where the Brownlee brothers were sort of taking off, so we're kind of rewinding back to about 2006, 2007. Triathlon was getting really big in the UK, and I loved it, and just through growing and whatever, really started to struggle with my running. So again, my dad took me down to the local athletics club, said, if we're going to get good at triathlon, you need to be able to run. So jumped in with the group at York, and then within a year had gone from coming about 50th in a West Yorkshire League cross country to I was 5th in the UK for 1500 metres.
Wow.
As under 13. Probably helped by a massive growth spurt as well.
Long legs.
But yeah, exactly. But just found from there, I just loved the running, and what I found was with the triathlon, there were so many elements that could go wrong. So, you're in the swim, you'd get hit by someone in the water and they duck you underneath a buoy, or someone pull your goggles off. I mean, if you see in the World Series now, they actually have referees on the buoys to actually watch whether people are basically being deliberately too brutal. But you get that, then you get on the bike and you could get a puncture, or I remember one race someone had knocked my bike in transition and my brakes had gone stiff, or someone falls off the bike in front of you and you fall off. And the running, it was just so simple. You could control almost every aspect, and I think that's what I really, really loved about it. It probably helps that that was my best sport of the three. So kind of about 2012, I'd qualified to run for England, for the England school team, and kind of 14, 15 coming up, sort of, well, I want to think about my school side of things, my education, also my sport. The time commitment to triathlon was so much. So I then decided to focus in on my running, and from there it's literally just been probably every day since that point, not thought about anything other than running.
I was going to say, I'm not surprised you focused on the running. One being you say a bit more simple, more in control, but you look at when people have crashes on bikes and stuff like that
Yeah,
down hills,
yeah.
and you look at the Tour de France and 50
Yeah.
people keel over, and you're
Exactly.
like, the minute because you're plugged in on the pedal as well, aren't you?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
not like you can jump off or whatever. You're
No.
probably going quick.
Yeah.
You know, you are breaking something, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think when you're younger, you don't really think about it.
Yeah.
But I think back to like riding through. So I grew up in Yorkshire, and some of the hills that I'd
Yeah,
ride
yeah.
down, and I think
You were softly conditioned for it.
if
maybe.
if I'd have fallen off, what would have happened? Because the risks are serious.
Yeah.
And also I guess like kind of from a background, the financial side of it as well. You know, bikes cost. The cheapest World Tour bike's £5,000.
Wow, yeah.
You know, even though a Nike Next Percent's pretty expensive, it's not £5,000.
Yeah.
So I found the running was kind of what I really, really loved. I had lots of really, really good friends in it. Loved the social aspect. Loved that it was, you know, all the disciplines were in together. So, you know, at York we were really good friends with the throwers, the sprinters, the multi-eventers, the jumpers. Got to have some really cool experiences going to English schools, mini marathon, just that community. I loved it.
So is that something you've had, like, family? Is people in your family,
No.
mum, dad, parents, anybody, any of your brothers, siblings, anybody been sort of into sports and athletics?
So no one before basically my dad doing triathlon ever did any endurance sport. We have no history of it. Dad's a very good runner in his own right, to be fair.
How good?
So he's run a 3-hour marathon.
Okay,
Kind of a 38-minute 10K last year. He's 55 years old. So
Wow.
really, he was a really good runner. But kind of he got into it because my brother and I got into it.
Yeah.
And then my brother he started out as a endurance runner, then went to being a hammer thrower.
Okay.
Then
Massive change that, is it? Yeah.
Then became a 400-meter hurdler a year later, and
Yeah.
he's really good. So he's won like Northern titles, just missed out on a national or British Champs final.
Is that
last
for
year.
400 hurdles?
400 hurdles,
Okay.
yeah. So he's got some serious wheels.
Is that quite common with things like athletics and stuff where, because I remember back to my school days and it was kind of, I was a 100-meter runner.
Yeah.
Well, I say I was a 100-meter runner. I was fast.
Yeah.
So they shoved me into 100 metres. But with that, you get shoved into triple jump, long jump. And because I loved sport, it was and I loved my PE teacher in middle school. He was a really, really good bloke, and PE teacher in upper school. I'd always be up for helping them out. It's like, someone's dropped out, can you do the cross country? It's like, that's hard going. But yeah, of course I will, mate, no problem. We'll just do it. So it's kind of, you do everything, don't you? So was that a case of like, is it that you just, you know, with people in your family and yourself, obviously you've tried out different things, your brother tried out different things, hammer, 400-meter hurdles, endurance, I would look at it, unskilled in this area, like that's 3 completely different things.
Yeah, massively. It really depends. So how the athletic system works in the UK, you have these like team meetings. So like they're called the youth development leagues, where it's basically a sports day for the different clubs, and you get points for where you come in each event. And my brother just
you do every event, do you, to sort of see how you get on?
The team does every event. Yeah, so you've got 200-meter runners, 200-meter runners, all the way up to the 3K, the hurdles. You've got all the jumps, all the throws. And essentially your team wins by packing out as many events as possible and coming up and getting as many wins as you can as well.
Yeah.
And my brother just used to be obsessed with winning as many points as he could for the team.
Yeah.
So the 4 hurdles and the hammer were always the least contested, so he used to do them. And just found out he was really good at them and really enjoyed them. I kind of came from the other side in as much as I started athletics because I wanted to get better at endurance running.
Okay.
So I was literally, my first year was only 1,500 metres I'd run, and then I dabbled like a little bit with 800s, 400s and
So I
some
always
longer
found
stuff.
those distances, 400, 800, 1,500.
Yeah.
I've always, like, thinking back to my school days and stuff, I always found those really difficult.
Yeah.
Because it's such a mix. Like, I think back, it's such a blend. Like 100 metres, hell for leather for 100 metres.
Yeah.
And I think it was under 11s or under 12s. So I won the school, I won the town championship 100 metres, and then got put into the county and went up against a lad called Anthony McWilliams.
Yeah.
Who was built like a guy, built like a geezer, and he just blitzed the whole field and went on and won loads of stuff, I think. But yeah, when I did like 400s and 800s, it just seemed like this in between.
Yeah.
I was okay with cross country because I was just helping the teacher out.
Yeah.
I just need to finish. You need to have a certain people finish in the top 10. I needed to do was just be part of the race and finish.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle, And then all the other ones that were good at endurance running would go and win or whatever, and then the school would win the race. The middle distances I always found really difficult. That mix of pace and keeping stuff back, I just never really understood what to do when.
It's the perfect blend of all the energy systems, and it's also the perfect blend of tactical nous as well. I mean, it's super exciting in the minute watching the world level, especially on the male side with the Josh Kerr versus Jakob Ingebrigtsen. Great to have like a and there's also other Brits here, Jake Whiteman in there as well. Great to see Brits kind of competing on the world stage. But you've got to be able to run a really, really competitive half marathon in terms of world terms. You also have to be able to run low 50 seconds or sub 50 seconds for 400 metres. So you are like the complete athlete almost.
That's
in that
what I mean.
regard.
When you think about the training that would have to go into that, it must be so complex and the commitment needed to go and cover all those bases.
And I think what's really exciting about it as well is that there isn't actually one way to train for it. There's not a uniformed approach. Like for the marathon, for example, you have to do a lot of running, and there's not really any getting around that. For 100 metres, you have to be really good at accelerating and be really quick. You can't get around that. Whereas the 1500, you've got guys like Seb Coe was famed for the fact that he didn't run huge mileage, but he never ran slower than 6 minutes a mile for any run. Whereas you've got other people, so like Mo Farah ran 3:28 for 1500 metres. The guy ran 120 miles a week. So two completely almost opposite training, but can get.
What do you think sort of behind
impact.
that? Is that just down to preference?
Yeah, it's down to the individual athlete. What do they respond most to? I think a lot of it's also down to kind of where the event is at the time. So at the moment, we're in a very kind of strength-based 1500 metre era. Jakob Ingebrigtsen is probably the number one in the world most consistently. His training model is very much, I run at this level of control, this level of pace, and it's very consistent. So every lap will be 54, 55 seconds. And to beat him, you have to be able to run 54, pace. 55, but also be able to accelerate. And, Jake and Josh did the exact same thing to him in, both previous world championships. The kind of 10 years before that, it was very much focused on you had to be able to run reasonably quick, nowhere near as quick as you are now, but you had to be able to close in 50 seconds. I mean, I remember the 2016 Rio final, they went through the bell in 3 minutes and ran 3:50. So, running 50 seconds for 400 metres after running
at the end
over it's pretty tough. So it's very different, and the event moves on very quickly.
Do you find that events like that, they have an era where it's based in and around, like you mentioned there, about somebody that's more endurance-based, somebody that's more strength-based? Do you find that when you're watching athletics, it goes through phases? Yeah,
massively. Yeah, definitely. There's kind of every 5 to 7 years, there's like a different generation of the runners that come through, which kind of always keeps it exciting.
I suppose the same when you look at sport in more detail, and you look at football. I'm a Liverpool fan, and you look at, like, you do have your teams will go with certain phases of football. You had the kind of ticky-tacky football at Barcelona that won them titles and Champions League. You then got the more attacking football of like Guardiola and Klopp in this era, which is just, what do they call it, heavy metal football or whatever it is. I'm sure there'll be other ones to come. It's sort of, when you look at it in more, I suppose it's just taking the hood off that particular sport and actually looking at, when you look at it in more detail, and that's one thing I found with my running since January, I still have no clue really what I'm doing. But I've got more clue than I did then. I kind of get, like, I even woke up this morning, I did an easy run yesterday, and for the second time, just didn't even time my watch. I just had my route planned. And the GPS told me where I was going. I know where I'm going in terms of that, but I just had the length planned out and stuff. So I just want to do 40 minutes, a nice easy one, and then come back. I woke up this morning really aching. It's like, well, I'm learning through every run that I've probably done that. I mean, I don't know, but I've probably done that too quick. And I looked at the time, I was like, okay, you chase time. I found my biggest issue in the last 6 months is I've been chasing time, and then my legs, my feet, you get blistered up, and it's like, it affects your running. You're like, I've got 3 blisters that are really painful. I can't shift them in 3 days. I've got to go and do another run in 3 days. And it's like, that's going to have an effect on that, and then it's going to get worse and worse. It's like, I don't want to take any time off, so I don't want to go backwards. And it's kind of, I think that's been my biggest struggle in personally in the last 6 months is I'm starting to enjoy it, but I think it's the understanding of what you're doing. Not just it's not just as I just want to go out and run. That's great, but I know it will come a time where I'm like, okay, I'm naturally a bit competitive. We said before we went live on here, it's like you start looking at different people and thinking, oh, what are they? But it's actually you're against yourself in reality.
You are indeed,
But it's the knowledge of and I think that's when we're looking into sort of your coaching. very much data-driven, evidence-based, one-on-one, quite bespoke per person, as much as it can be. And it's kind of, when you've got that knowledge, I think that's what people are searching for, which is probably why your coaching's become quite popular, because you've got the experience of doing it yourself, you've got good knowledge, and it's modern, which is, in the modern era of sport, is data-driven decisions rather than just how I'm feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the big thing kind of when setting up PGC1 was my background being a sport and exercise scientist is that we use data within sport and exercise science, and there's really, really good things about the data in sport and exercise science, but there's also a lot of limitations to it. On the other side, you have, the art of coaching and getting the most out of someone. And that's all really good, but can you do that with like a better information basis as well? And, the strap line of the business is applying scientific concepts to help you improve. And we really marry up those two things. And we're focusing the individual, what data are they producing? How can we make that better? But also, what does that individual person need? Because, there are some athletes that we've got that love the data. They want to see it all the time. Maybe actually too obsessed with the data and making the numbers look great. Well, pretty numbers don't necessarily make PBs. We also have some athletes who they don't care about the data. They don't want to know about it. They just want to be able to get better at running, or they just want to keep accountable to go out and run 4, 5, 6 times a week and have some fun and enjoy it and go and experience new things. So, we
How
really...
do you cater for that then?
It's about getting to know the individual. I wish there was kind of a more entertaining phrase in which I could use there, because it's sort of, you see it all the time. We just, know the person, but it's as simple as that, we talk to the athletes when they come on board through the consultations. We find out and we listen to them, and what do they want out of their running, what are their goals, and then kind of using our own experiences with different people and different kind of training systems as to how can we get the most out of that person. And that's always an evaluating, concepts, and it's a process that changes over time. There are times where actually you've got to flex and say, right, this person needs to see the data because they've not been as compliant with their training as they could, and then they've not achieved their goal. Or other side, there's people that have been super compliant and done loads and loads and loads of stuff, but then they got to the race and they've been really, really fatigued and actually haven't achieved because they've probably run their race in training by just simply trying to make too much training, or making the training too perfect, and actually psych themselves out of the race because they're I think that you've got a certain amount of basically mental fatigue that you can put yourself through in any period of time, whether that be a training block, a calendar year, a month, etc. And you want to have as much of that capacity ready to go and use on your goal race day. And I think, some people use that kind of reserve too much in training and don't have that ready for race day.
I'll piss my other half off, Sophie, because I'm talking a lot about, I've just done this and I've done that, and I'm really going to focus on that. She's like, Aaron, you're just running, mate. Like, but I want to try and get good at it and all this sort of stuff. And I do get what you just said has really hit home. I've been trying to get under a 20-minute 5K. That was my goal in January, is get under a 20-minute 5K. You look at it and think, well, that's one of the kind of benchmarks that people like to go for. I didn't really know what I wanted to go for, so I thought I'll go for that. And kind of looked at TikTok videos of I followed some guy called Gabriel.
Okay.
I think his name's Gabriel. He seems to know what he's talking about. I mean, he's run 2:29 in a marathon, and he seems to simplify stuff, which, again, is everyone's different, like what you said there, in terms of what you want to take in. Because when people start talking about power zones and monitoring your this and that and stuff, and all the stuff that appears on your watch, it's like three quarters of it just through not understanding it, not being through that process. I have no idea what it is. And he just simplified it and said you need to do 3 runs a week. A long one, an easy one, and one that's more speed or tempo based. Do that for a few months and then give it a crack. And I remember I was analysing my watch whilst I was running so much, to the point where the runs seemed harder for me. And then I'd go out and then I'd say, okay, I'm going to give that 5K a go. And I'd chip a bit off, but I wouldn't chip off as much as what I would want to, or what I think I'm capable of doing. And then that'd piss me off. And it does, that kind of mental side of it, I think it does. And then when I did do a reasonable time for what I wanted to do, it was on a day where I didn't know I was going to do it. I just said to Sophie, I'm going to go out this morning. I've got a tempo session, but I feel quite good. I've slept, I've got a young baby and that, so I was like, sleep's limited, and the effect sleep has on running is incredible. I wouldn't have even thought about that at the start when you start looking into it. The watch has said I've had a inconsistent sleep. That's good for me. I'm going to go and try and just do a 5K.
Yeah.
And I just went out and knocked a minute and a half off of it.
Yeah.
And I thought, I weren't even trying. No, I was trying, but I wasn't. I think it was a few things just came together, which was 2-3 months of consistency.
Yeah.
And me not actually knowing I was going to do it. I haven't overthought it.
Yeah.
I know I need to go out and do a certain, between 3:45, 3:55 for the first couple, and then just try and keep to as far as possible. And that was my method. But I felt strong doing the run. But I think it all just stuff came together. Yeah. And then I was buzzing at the end. Really buzzing at the end. But yeah, it's weird how when you actually look at the factors, when you think about running, you just think, I'm just going to go out and run. But there's so many You mentioned there that running was the simplest out the three when you're doing triathlon. See, I find it really complicated because I'm trying to, probably because of my lack of knowledge and experience, I'm just trying to analyse everything. You're taking things in. This person's saying one thing, this person's saying another. Yeah. And they seem to both be decent at running when you have a look, and it's like they're way better than me, so it's like maybe I need to listen to this, but his argument here counteracts this one here, and it's like, who do you go to, what do you actually listen to? And that confusing thing for me is the science behind it, because I don't really understand it.
I mean the science behind it, kind of, we could literally talk for hours about all the kind of basic elements of it, and they're so complex. That's the reason why there's so many doctors and PhDs in endurance training. I think the biggest thing to kind of dispel most of the myths is you have to look at the source at which the information is coming from, and what is the purpose of that source. Almost like GCSE history style, like you look at the person, are they a brand ambassador for something? Are they trying to sell something? Because you can manipulate a lot of the research in running to fit whatever bill you want, and whatever you want to sell. But the kind of the simplest form is that there's a really, really good paper by like Duffield. I forget if it's like early 2000s or early 2010s it came out. They just gave the aerobic contribution to exercise, to different endurance events. So it's 1500 all the way up. And your 1500 metres is about 80% aerobic capacity. The 3K kind of gets into the early 90s. 5K is about 95%. Everything else is 99% and above. So your skill is you've got to be aerobically adapted. So, making a basic training plan, how can you get the most amount of aerobic adaptation possible without losing time for injuries, for illness, and for loss of motivation? The way you do that is through kind of, to put it into a gym context, hypertrophy of the kind of inwardly of the physiology, so your lungs, your heart, etc. If you're going to the gym to build up your kind of biceps for the beach weights and to go to Ibiza in the summer, you just have to lift as much as possible, and you don't do that by doing 1 rep maxes. So go and run easy as much as possible for whatever you can kind of sustain as the individual. For some people, they're really robust. They could do that 7 times a week, no problem. There's other people that 2-3 times a week's enough. And that's your basis. You go and run easy, and you will see those kind of basic adaptations start.
See, that was the thing that I found really confusing. Just in terms of processing it. And I'm kind of
go easy to go hard. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, okay, I've been doing three runs a week for 6 months, and the long one is between 15 and 22k, and then the easy one's 40 minutes, and then some speed stuff. And it's like yesterday, like I said to you, I've woke up this morning, my legs feel quite dead. I've obviously gone out, I've done it too quick. But then I'm running, I'm telling myself, I'm not watching my watch because that makes me run faster. So I'm kind of thinking, just slow it down. This is just an easy one. It's not about how far I run. It's about just running for 40 minutes and then going home. And even then, it's difficult, really difficult, because even then, it's like I wasn't chasing any time, but obviously I was going too quick. And it's like, how do you slow yourself down to the point of feeling uncomfortable and silly running really slow?
You need to be able to talk to yourself. When you run. So the best internal measure is rate of perceived exertion, and you do that by basically having a conversation with yourself. So when you go out for an easy effort run, you should be in conversational pace the whole time and be able to talk in full sentences. So our last runners, even if they're running on their own, every time you watch splits for if it's a K or a mile, have a chat with yourself. Ask yourself a few questions, answer those questions. If you're struggling to speak, you're running too fast, slow it back down. And that's probably the best internal measure you can use to take all of the data metrics out, because as much as, again, I say we love data at PGC1 and we use a lot of it.
Yeah.
I've got a really lovely watch here. It only cost me £200, which I know is not the cheapest, but something that costs £200 in any other walk of life or any other business, would you let that rule absolutely everything you did? Absolutely, you would not.
No,
there is so much data error margins in everything your watch says. So you've still got to have that level of context to it. I definitely don't think Lord Sugar uses any software that costs £200 to rule anything that he does. So just having that internal measure, and it is personal then to you, because you know how that feels, and you can replicate that wherever you go, whether you go to altitude, whether you're where it's really, really hot, whether you're where it's really cold, somewhere that's hilly, that's
going to have an effect, isn't it?
That process stays the same and is consistent throughout. And that's kind of what running's about. It's about learning what are your kind of key, almost internal measures, and how can you replicate those into lots of various
how do you
different
guys
situations.
at your coaching company, how do you do that for a person? What's the kind of process?
So we use Training Peaks for our training software, and that sends all the workouts to the watch. And we'll kind of, in the description of the comments on each workout, we'll kind of talk them through goals of what we're looking to achieve. We also do it through kind of the meetings and the one-to-one chats we have with our athletes via WhatsApp or via video call. And then when we meet them in person as well, because we have that blend of meeting our athletes in person as much as possible, unless they're too far abroad, and again, we'll talk through this is how we feel. And I think that the big difference with what we do at PGC1 is, we've been there and done it as athletes, and we've done it there on the coaching side, so we know and we can relate to what the athletes are going through. I say all of this now with confidence and being assured that you should be running easy and whatever. When I trained at a high level, I was an absolute the worst one for getting on a run and being like, right, okay, I'm going to send it now, doing stupid stuff. So actually a lot of the coaching is actually learning from the fact of I made hundreds and thousands of mistakes in my own running. So many things I wish I could go back and change, and if I knew what I know now, it could have been made so many more adaptations. A lot of it is just through that experience and messaging and relating to those people. Not everyone is a data scientist, not everyone wants to know all these crazy metrics for heart rate and things like that, so we just put it into the most simplest digestible form. I see the role as a coach as a translator. You are taking things from the top level PhD scientists, the top level behavioural psychologists, all of those areas, and you've got to translate it into something that every single person can then listen to what you say and understand it and grasp it, no matter what their background. And that's essentially what we do.
Because a lot of things, a lot of the running places you see online and stuff, it's very broad brush stuff. And the more I run, the more I understand how personal that sort of stuff is. Like, it's the same as like your gym workout plans. You got thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that pop up online, our one-to-one workout plans, and they send the same plan as you sent to Dave last week, and it just goes around. But you can tell this is a lot more personalised and a lot more bespoke through actually listening to people, looking at the data, and like you said, they're translated. Because for me, I don't really understand the data too much. I've probably got a lot to learn in terms of understanding what I want out of it and how my body's responding to different things that I do. Having somebody say, based on what you've told me that you want to achieve, I think you should be doing that today. It's a huge help, because then you're taking the whole that effort of making that decision away, and actually 9 times out of 10 it's probably going to be a heck of a lot more accurate than whatever you've watched on YouTube or TikTok that you then go and do.
I think the biggest thing with a coach is a good coach can take the emotional aspect out. So, you can set a plan for someone to help them run a sub 25k without the emotion of, the last time I did a 5k, I got to this point and then I didn't feel strong. So now I need to learn how to be strong between 3 and 4.2k.
It's a mental fuck, I think, running.
And you can then get into a real overthinking side. Whereas as a coach, you can kind of zoom out, take the lens out and look and go, right, well, what did this athlete do really well? What could we do better? And what so many people do is they just focus on the weaknesses. Let's make the weaknesses better. We've got to improve the weaknesses. Or why don't you just play on your strengths? Make your strengths even stronger.
Yeah.
And with that, raise the ceiling, and you can hopefully improve more as an athlete. And that's kind of that's our role, and that's what we do.
How much do you think the mental side of it comes into play?
Oh, massive. And again, that's individual to each person. I've heard people say that running's like 10% physical, 9% mental. For some people it is. For some people it's more of a physical thing. And I think the really exciting thing about running is, like, essentially as a coach you can control nearly 100% of the physical capacity of someone. But dialing into the mentality of how they perceive their running or themselves, that's a really kind of interesting and fun part to be a coach. But yeah, the mentality behind running is way bigger than anyone can kind of
I think
almost
that's been
comprehend.
my biggest learn since January. Because about 6 years ago I went for a run down Brampton Valley Way.
Yeah.
Flat.
Yeah.
Boring and flat.
Well, it feels uphill both directions.
Yeah, it's one of them, isn't it? Yeah.
It's like, there's different places that you go, technically it should be flat, but that run, it is definitely uphill in both directions.
It's just so boring as well, because there's literally nothing to look at. It's just fields, and it's like, and that plays on your mind, because you listen to music, but it's like running on a treadmill. It's just kind of gets to a place where you're like, this is really boring, and you start focusing on your toe hurting, or you start focusing on my legs starting to give me a bit of jip, rather than if you were running somewhere new or a more interesting route where you have to be wary of your surroundings, because there's road or whatever. You don't really, there's certain things you don't think about because your mind is focused elsewhere. But I remember I went down Brampton Valley Way, and my brother had to pick me up about 9.5 or 10.5 miles in. My body just gave up. I couldn't carry on. That was about 6-7 years ago. I did exactly the same route about a month and a half ago. I was running 11k out and 11k back to do the half, because I live right next to the Windover, in that estate next to the Windover, so it's perfect route down there for me, nice and easy, down the road, and I'm out. I'm running a long distance. I didn't have the GPS watch thing, so I didn't want to get like lost and not understand how far I've run, or finish like 2k away from my house or whatever. So I run up there, and I remember going past the same bit that I gave up on. And I knew it was coming. And I knew I'd been past it because there was a bench near it that I sat on previously. And that mile and a half, I was feeling good. And I knew I was coming up to this. And the mile, kind of like either way, was really psychologically difficult. Really difficult. Like, I wasn't expecting it. Because I was like, I'll give up here. And I could just press pause on my watch, sit down for 10, and then resume and just fucking crack on. No one's going to know anything. No one really cares, because it's my run, nobody else's. And it was a real... I must have tried to convince myself to stop at that same spot. No word of lie, probably 20 times. It was, and after that, like, my pace was shit through that 2 mile period. It was a mental. I really do feel like I fight with myself a lot on running, and I find that the most hardest.
And that's also the most rewarding part of it, because when you win that in a battle with your own head, like, that feeling makes you feel so strong and like so worthwhile. And I think we run in the big difference between that and other sports is, in other sports you've got a lot of technical competency that you need. So you take football or tennis or cricket, for example. Cricket, you've got to get your head over the ball. All of those technical competencies become part of your process of how do you score the maximum for those runs. Football, how do I execute my best tackle? You're not thinking, you don't go into a football game thinking I'm going to tackle 20 people today. Whereas when you do running, there is kind of almost that lack of technical side, so you focus solely on the outcome goal. And the biggest thing that we've changed over the years with our coaching is actually, dialing it back round and going, well, what's the process of how are you going to go and run this sub 25k? How are you going to go and run this marathon? What are the different things you're going to go through? And in other sports, they're technical competencies. These are mental competencies that you've got to go through. What will my mentality be like when I feel like things are caving in on me, when it gets to this point in the marathon? And then I always talk about a resilience toolbox. So I tell all my athletes, pick 2 to 5 resilient events in your life, both running and personal, that you've gone through a hard time. When your brain starts to tell you, or the emotions in your brain start to tell you, I'm struggling here, I'm not going to make it. You go, right, almost, change gear, reverse, right, well, what was this event that I found myself being really resilient? What were the feelings that I had? How did I get through it? I believe in myself. I am someone that can get through this hard time. And then you kind of put it back
do you think that is taking, do you think mentally that process of picking a resilience, an event out of the toolbox. Do you think that works because you're focusing on something else, or the thing you're focusing on?
I think it's two ways, or two-pronged almost. It reverts the focus away from it being really, really hard.
Yeah.
But also, we as humans, we take confidence in knowing kind of certainty in situations. And the hard thing about running is there is a lot of uncertainty as to how your body's going to react at the end. So if you can almost have a certainty where you know you achieved something or you were really, really strong, having that mentality of like, I am someone that does well when the chips are down. I am someone that's really, really strong. I am someone that can complete things. That again can change the brain's kind of thought process and your emotions to almost seeing the challenge as something that's going to raise you up rather than something that's going to beat you down.
It's weird that you say that, because then I think about some of the things that I think about, and I think I use anger.
Yeah.
Because if I'm on a difficult one, I remember there was a couple of bits I tried to think about which were relating to my family, my kids, partner, difficult times we've been through, and that didn't work for me.
No.
It actually made me run slower, I think, because it kind of was like, it was more of an upsetting experience, I think, rather than, obviously, a hard experience, but more of an upsetting experience. And then, really stupidly, I'm quite competitive. Like, when I remember various times where we started our businesses, and my old bosses, years and years ago, turned around and said, you ain't ready to do it. You will never make this work. Like, I know there's 2 bosses in particular, 3 tops, but 2 in particular were like, you will never do this. You just don't have it in the locker. And I turned to that, because the businesses are so important to me. They are like my kids. They're going to provide for my family. I enjoy it. They are like a nurtured child, as you know, with your coaching business. You nurture it over a period of time, protect it at all costs. And these old bosses, as much as there's elements that I respect, and I've learned good and bad off of these people, I'm not going to name any names, but there's 2 people in particular that I know run very successful businesses, but they're absolute fucking arseholes. They've sold their businesses for millions and millions of pounds, multiple businesses, but they're fucking arseholes. And they treated me like an arsehole. They didn't, I think, see, well, maybe they were using reverse, I don't know, I don't want to think too much into it, but it's like a bit of an analogy where they would be the 2 faces I'd put on the dartboard if I was throwing darts. They'd be the people I'd put on the punch bag and smash them to bits. Whenever things are going tough, I always, personally, professionally, I think about those moments, and it's that kind of back against the wall, you said I couldn't do it, but I'll fucking show you.
And
it's that motivates me. When I'm running, I think about that all the time.
And that shows that when someone or when something, you're in the back against the wall, it's really tough. You've got a choice. Do you listen to it and accept, okay, fine, I'm not going to be that person, or go, actually, no, I've got the strength within me. And events like that are really good. You know, you have events like that with resilience events with family, and then in personal parts of training, like, you know, when you go and do marathon blocks, there's parts of those long runs where you're like, I really don't want to do this anymore. This is so hard. Everything hurts. And if you can get through those small moments,
you've proved that you've completed it.
And then you know, you add that to the bank, and that's, you know, what training is almost. It's doing enough to basically make you physically strong, mentally strong, without making you too tired. And that is what a good training plan is.
So, what do you think has been the toughest moment in your kind of professional career when you're talking about running? Where you've had to plug into your resilience toolbox?
I think, there's been quite a few moments, I'd probably say. I think there's been times where, personally, I've kind of, through my journey with my coaching, I put my own running on hold. And actually, it probably took me 2 or 3 years to actually get to a point where I was okay with the fact of my identity was I was an athlete who started coaching, and then I'd shift into becoming a coach that was an athlete.
Quick word from one of our sponsors, Guru Technology. Simply put, they're the highest Google-rated company in their industry. A very different service and a very different set of products covering business-to-business mobiles, phone systems, energy, renewables and EV, security, CCTV, alarms, AMPR, broadband and IT. They specialise in dealing with companies who are receiving really poor service and spending a lot of money currently with their supplier. They will come to site, do a free of charge audit and fix any problems that you're having. So if you've got problems with your current supply chain, search Guru Technology in Google and give them a buzz. Thank you. Let's get back to the podcast.
And I still, socialise with a lot of athletes. I kind of still saw myself as an athlete. And that was probably the hardest thing that I had to kind of navigate, was that transition of, you used to be someone that ran on the track and on the cross country and on the roads.
Is that pride, or is that just is that like the dream that you had previously and maybe your dream's now changed?
Yeah, I think it's probably both. Really proud of everything that I did. I think there was potentially still more things I could have achieved. I didn't want them bad enough to want to keep going out there and doing them. And I think it was difficult to let go. I think my identity was fully kind of formed onto my own running. It had been everything that I'd known throughout childhood, throughout university. It was all of my friends, so it was kind of quite difficult.
Massive part of your life.
So probably that would be the biggest thing, where it took a lot of resilience to actually come to terms with that, really.
I suppose it's similar, like a professional sportsman that's been doing something for so long, and they kind of finish and retire, and it's like, well, what am I doing now?
Yeah.
Obviously, you fell into doing stuff that's still in the same area, isn't it? That's why I suppose a lot of footballers go into punditry, because they're kind of still involved in the whole ethos of it.
Exactly, and I think almost that made it even harder, because it was like, I still am involved in the sport,
You're not doing it,
but I'm not doing it. But then I'm going for runs, but then, so it became a very kind of quite confusing time. So that's probably the thing that's kind of shown the most resilience, was to actually do the self-work to remove my identity from my own athletic achievements, and actually it be about, this is a job and it's a business and I love coaching, but also having a separate identity away from that as well.
So you had time where you run for England.
Yes.
And then you had time also where you're injured, and then sort of came back as such. So what happened through that process? I'm sure that for someone who's competitive, business wasn't going on at that point, I don't think, wasn't it?
No, this is,
prior to the business.
That,
So you're kind of, so the injury with sports people is usually quite a difficult period, isn't it? Frustrating periods. How did that all come about?
Yeah, so I wasn't necessarily too injured. I think I did a lot of things that I lost my way a little bit, kind of in sixth form with my running, trying new things. Didn't probably have as much direction as I needed, maybe. But then also with my mentality, I am someone that's so like driven and so like in my own head. I was trying things and they didn't necessarily work. And I think actually I started to overthink running a lot, and try and do too many different things, and basically got to the point where I'd had a couple of injuries, and I was like, do I actually really want to run anymore? Is this something I want to do? And I went to university and had a meeting with my kind of old coach, Andy Henderson. And prior to that meeting, I think I just kind of rewound it all back and was like, what's my purpose? Why do I actually want to run? And I'd seen people get Ingon vests over the years. And I was like, do you know what? I want one of them again. Because I was like, I don't think that running for Ingon once was enough. I wanted to go out back there again. And that was all I wanted to do. And that gave me then that purpose and that core why. And then because I had that why and had that kind of driven goal, it then meant that I got out for all of those runs. I did all of the training in order to try and achieve that. The difficulty was I thought that was going to take me 5-10 years to get that goal, and I got it in 18 months, and then spent the next 18 months thinking, what do I do now? Because I've already achieved my goal. So,
What was that? Just good training, or just you
good training?
You were a lot more advanced than where you thought you'd be after your kind of blip as such?
Yeah, really good training. Put in a huge amount of work. I was really fortunate that I ran well in the race in which it was to qualify. Actually, I was really fortunate that I had a really bad race just before it, where I forgot about all the processes, tried to think about all the outcomes, and actually in that race I just simplified things down. It was like, go with this pack, stay as long as possible, and just kick at the end, and
see where you get to,
see what happens.
And was that what, 5K or 1500?
That was on the cross country, so that was at Parliament Hill, national cross country.
What's your PB at 5K?
14:39, pre-super shoes.
Jesus.
So I can sound like an old man. This is my kind of favourite thing to do.
When you say pre-super shoes, are we talking about
my spikes, if I do it to the camera, like they're that much cushioning.
Yeah.
And if you think like a next percent's got like that much now.
Okay.
So essentially it was like
they bounce
running
you along
barefoot. Yeah. The new shoes, the technology is so much more
where
advanced.
do you think the PB would be with the new shoes?
I'm not sure. Maybe maybe 10 seconds quicker, so maybe 20, who knows.
So you're low 14s to mid 14s.
Yeah. I probably should have broken
That's
14:30
ridiculous.
for 5k.
That's ridiculous speed.
Yeah, I couldn't manage.
What's
my
that
own
per
body,
K?
So 2:55. Yeah.
I can't run like my fastest ever 1k is 3:36.
Yeah.
3:34.
Yeah.
And I think that was a bit downhill, just as a cheat.
Yeah.
Downhill from my house and out to the Brampton Valley Way.
Yeah.
I can't imagine ever being able to physically run that fast.
Yeah.
And then you're keeping that up for a bit. 5k don't sound like a lot, but at that intensity.
I think what the most harrowing thing was in my own.
You sure you weren't
career,
rolling down a hill, or you weren't in the car or anything? No?
I mean, I think the most harrowing moment I had in my whole running career is I went to watch the Ineos 159 challenge with my mates. We went for a run on the course the day before. And we were like, let's get rolling a little bit, let's do some quicker miles. And we dropped this 5:35 mile down the Hauptpaula. And I looked at my watch, I was like, yeah, I'm moving pretty quickly here, this is good. And then I was like, hang on a second, actually. There's a bloke tomorrow is going to run a minute a mile faster for 26 ridiculous. Of these with no recovery and run an extra 400 metres. I've run 1 mile at 5:35s. It's like, he would just come by me and fly off. I was like, it's ludicrous that I was at a really good level nationally, and that would still be nothing, and so I think that's the thing with running is there's so many different levels, and even then some people say Eliud Kipchoge's the greatest marathon runner ever. He's not the quickest marathon runner ever, so that's the kind of the amazing thing with running is that almost no one is the best. There is no one single person.
Depends on how you measure, what you measure,
exactly.
And opinions, I suppose.
And so you can always be making yourself better and improving.
Yeah, that's a crazy time. I look at that time and I just think, how is that even is that even possible? So, talk to me about your sort of start of PGC1 then. So, how did it all come about? Because I know it was sort of in and around COVID time just before. So, how did you transition from? You've mentioned about what you were doing when you were running for England and sort of school running and stuff like that. And then your uni experience at Loughborough. How did you and when did you think, do you know what, I want to start a coaching business?
So I'd always had probably an obsession with improvement. And I'd always thought about all of the ways that, I could make someone better or someone could be better. And use that on myself a lot. Did a lot of watching, reading, listening about everything to do with running. Chronic overthinker. And as part of my uni degree, we needed to do kind of a certain amount of hours worth of like voluntary stuff and placement stuff in order to pass on the modules.
Yeah.
And with that, I was running a lot of the time, and I was like, well, how can I ensure I'm doing all my training alongside, doing these development hours and whatever. And then with that, I was like, well, why don't I set some training plans? I'm doing sports science. I understand the physiology. I'd like to help people improve.
Yeah.
So I, reached out to a friend at the time at work, up and running, called George, and said, basically, can I send you a plan? And what do you think? They really liked the plan. They improved a bit. So I kept doing it. Did it for another athlete. Did it for my dad as well. And I was kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, well, these athletes are getting better and better and better. So
something's working.
Do I know what I'm talking about? So got to the situation where I'm going to Loughborough, doing my masters. I need an income, but I'm gonna struggle to do that alongside running myself, alongside a full-time course. So I basically thought, right, well, maybe monetize it. And there had been a movement of running coaches starting professionally. There was a couple of running coaches out there, and I just threw caution to the wind and said, okay, I'm gonna put this out as a business and I'll start charging for people for it, see what happens.
Yeah.
And I was super fortunate that a couple of guys in like Northampton got in contact. And the business they improved quickly. They told their mates about it. We started a weekly session in Daventry, and then suddenly there was 5 people attending, 10 people attending, 15 people, and it just kind of bounced on from there. And there was never really any actual goal with it other than to just have enough money to be able to get to and from Loughborough for a year, and then I was going to go and do whether that was good.
So it was a stopgap at the start.
Yeah,
really,
essentially, it was only going to run for a year. I'd never thought about how far it was going to go.
Yeah.
And basically, through kind of some things some things just being able to kind of provide sessions for people and whatnot, it then got bigger and bigger and bigger.
So what do you reckon's been the toughest part of your journey so far with the business?
I think it's been managing the interest in what we do, and then my own capacity for work and how much I can provide for people, and then bringing other coaches into the mix as well.
Okay, so you mean, at the start you're doing everything yourself?
Yeah.
When is the time where you might need to bring somebody in?
Yeah,
How's that going to affect
Yeah.
dilution of quality of training and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really fortunate that all the coaches that have worked for me over the years have been super high quality, worked really, really hard, and, they're all incredibly knowledgeable people in their own right. I was really kind of, throughout my recruitment process, when I worked with each one of them, wanted to get people that I worked well with.
How did you find them?
Just through kind of contacts, friends before, or knew them through university. Jack Foot, who works for me now, he just messaged me on Instagram and said, I want to get into running coaching and I want to do a year in industry. Can I come and join you for a year? My mate Dan says you're a nice guy. Yeah, and I was like, well, I didn't know anything of Jack really. Met him for a coffee in Loughborough. And then, from there, it's almost like, again, skyrocketed.
So what does he do for you at the moment?
So he's exactly like me, a kind of a coach in his own right.
Yeah.
And he, works with a group of athletes. I'm kind of very much at the capacity of what I can do individually.
So you're still managing a group of athletes that you look after, and then Jack manages his own pool of people, and then what the other Jack and Molly do?
Yes.
Slightly different things or similar? Or?
So Molly does the same as Jack and I, but she also manages our social media side as well.
Okay.
And she's kind of the brand marketing manager. But yeah, we all manage our own athletes in our own right, but underneath the PGC1 brand and the PGC1 model, which is that data-driven coaching married up with the art of what does that individual need from us as the running coach or the triathlon coach.
Okay. What did your family have to say when they said, "Oh, I'm going to start my own thing"?
I called my dad out here. He was kind of almost along the lines of, when are you going to get a job?
Yeah.
And I think actually to begin with, my mum and dad are both teachers.
Yeah.
They didn't really probably quite understand what I was doing because it's such a niche career,
Yeah.
I could almost name every single coaching brand to you in the UK.
Yeah.
I couldn't certainly do that for anything else, clothing brands, car brands, etc. So yeah, it was a very niche job. And I think they were a little bit uncertain, really, to begin with. My dad was definitely more certain when I started doing some work in a school that he thought, okay, there's actually something legit here.
Yeah, because teaching's quite reserved, I couldn't do it. Very difficult career. A lot of commitment, a lot of hours, rewarding, but quite a safe career.
Yeah.
You'd class it as a safe career, wouldn't you, I suppose?
Whereas there's a lot of risk with running a business.
Doing your own thing, yeah.
But yeah, I think over the years, I mean, they're so proud of what we've done and what we've achieved. And my mum was texting me watching a race, at the start of the year, and she was like, "I can see your banner. You guys get mentioned all the time." So yeah, they, I think they're super proud of what I've done now.
So how did COVID affect your kind of business transition and?
It was really interesting. At the start of COVID, I was kind of like, you follow that kind of rhetoric that the government give of, it's going to be a really tough time for businesses, etc. And, I was kind of almost built in my head the fact of every day that the business is able to still run, it's a good day, and have your other options available as to other career pathways you can go down. But actually the complete opposite happened. Obviously everyone got into running because it was kind of one of the only things you could do.
You can go out for a walk once a day. That's what we're allowed to do, isn't it?
Yeah, 60 minutes a day. And the business pretty much doubled in size because of COVID. And you know what? It really gave me a great time to be able to experiment with athletes and give athletes training, show them what the consistency can give them, show them the results that they could get off the back of that. And I think that really helped with the buy-in of what I was kind of talking about as a coach. And it gave me that time to do it without the need for results. Now, thinking kind of back as to I'd got athletes running marathons and stuff that spring, I don't necessarily think they would have run as quickly as what they maybe should have, because I don't think the training was actually quite right for them. And it actually, really gave
because
me
of COVID and the lack of being able to see these people, or just because of maybe your training, your stuff was adapting?
My training mentality needed, adapting and changing, and that process would have happened, but actually COVID meant that it took all the impact of needing results out of because there was no races. So we could do that process without almost the bad results in there. Yeah. And again, that helped with the buy-in. And yeah, it was without COVID, I wouldn't be sat here probably doing this podcast. It was the best thing that happened to running. And you look at the running boom across the country.
Yeah, there has been, yeah.
I mean, we're doing group races and things like that. They're selling out. They've never sold out ever. There used to be one race that would sell out 2 weeks before in the calendar for what we used to do. And now it's like, if you're not getting an entry in something nearly 12 months in advance to the big races, you ain't getting in.
Yeah. I think just not in normal life as well, away from the racing and stuff, like typically you see more people out.
Yeah.
More people are walking and running about now than ever before. I go walk the dog early most mornings, and there's 3 or 4 people that will run past you.
Yeah. The sport's got massive, which is awesome. And as a runner and fan of running myself, it's brilliant that we're able to share this with so many new people as well.
So from the start, obviously, it was just you looking after a small catchment of people remotely and stuff like that. You mentioned now that you've got obviously other coaches specialising in different areas. That's obviously going to mean you've got more athletes. Mm-hmm. Is it a mixed set of athletes? Have you got people that are sort of just beginning to run, and then you've got people that are running to a really, really good standard, or do you just take people that are really looking to really be serious about their running, or what's the kind of demographic?
So we are non-selective with the athletes that we take on. Essentially, the only selection criteria is, are you willing to kind of commit to the training, and do you want to improve and be better in your own right?
Yeah.
And better isn't necessarily a time aspect. You don't have to run PBs to be part of PGC1.
Yeah.
But we just want to work with people that want to make themselves the best version of themselves.
Yeah.
So we've got athletes all the way from 7-hour marathon runners to at the top end. We've got a guy who's currently ranked 7th or 8th in the UK for 1500 metres.
Okay.
Formerly coached the Gibraltar national record holder for the marathon, who went to the Commonwealth Games. George, the athlete that I mentioned at the start, they finished 2nd in the non-elite in Manchester Marathon and actually ran on the elite start for Manchester Marathon this year. We'll have good for age standards, championship standards for London Marathon as well. So we've got a broad spectrum of athletes from very, very recreational beginners all the way to kind of towards the top echelon of the UK.
The commitment side of it, because I'm sure, like, if you think about PTs, for example, it's like you're using that PT as an element to be accountable. I'm sure there's an element of that with coaching as well, even though I think there's a lot more to it from what you're saying than it would just be with a PT. But how do you manage a situation where they're paying you a fee, but they're maybe not necessarily doing the sessions to what you would expect? Is there ever a situation where you're like, look, I just don't think this is working for you?
Yeah, we've had that before. There's been times where I kind of don't necessarily feel like maybe the individual coach is able to get what they
get the most out of
them. The relationship's not necessarily working correctly. And we can we've redistributed athletes before for that. We've also kind of parted ways with people. We've got a really good data manager as well that's part of the business, Tom. So he looks at the club compliance scores. We'll then check that each week as individual coaches, and then if you can see patterns arising, you don't complete this session every week on Wednesday. What happens on a Wednesday? How come you can't do this?
Obviously getting in the way of it,
and use that kind of personal touch. But for me, it's always about coaches kind of back in the day, it was almost like they're here and the athlete's here, whereas we see ourselves as this kind of the hands underneath, and we're raising them up. How can I help you get 4 runs a week in? What are the things I can do? Do you need flexible days? What is it that we can do to help you get out and empowering people? And I think that allows us to actually not have that clash athlete to coach, because it's almost see it as the coach, if the athlete is struggling to get out, well, that's part of my job to help them get into that position. And for some people, it's just that they don't want to do it anymore, and there's nothing you can do there. And that's when you would.
And that might be right for them.
Exactly.
So how big is the business now? Like, how many sort of athletes are you working with?
We've got over 130 athletes within the business, and working across all areas of the world. Athletes in Australia, the Middle East, Europe.
Lewis puts up some stuff.
Yes,
he's over in
Australia now,
he's seriously quick as well.
He is, come on a long way. Awesome guy as well. All the way across the UK, so from the south coast all the way up to, we've got 3 athletes in West Ayrshire in Scotland. So,
That's some interesting hill.
Never gets above about 5 degrees, I don't think.
No chance. So what do you, so one thing I wanted to ask, it's not actually on here, but it's just come up to me now, is about recovery. There is a question actually about element of recovery in here, we'll do in a minute, but maybe it's bespoke for each person, I suppose, depending on what they're training for. But there's a phase of people at the minute in terms of a lot of recovery stuff. So things like ice baths and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, you see different people use them and bits of it. Like, I've got an ice bath. My daughter works for the company, and I've ice bathed since this will be the second year I've done it now. How does that? I mean, you're very much, you've got the knowledge of with your experience and stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's the same as anything. There's a mental part of doing up things like ice bath recovery that is a challenge, and that's what I'd like. There's also a physical part of it. Is that actually a thing?
I'm going to upset some people and probably stop myself ever from getting a brand partnership deal with an ice bath company now. For training adaptation, they don't work.
Okay.
So the science behind it is that you ice the body to stop inflammation from occurring.
Yeah.
So that works really, really well in an isolated situation where you've got a team sports player, for example. Northampton Town are playing Sunday afternoon kickoff, and they've got a Tuesday evening kickoff as well.
Yeah.
That athlete needs to be back with the most prepared muscles ready to go and play at the desired intensity in 48 hours time.
Yeah.
So reducing the inflammation there would be really, really crucial, just so that their muscles can be in the best point possible.
Yeah.
When you're looking at a more chronic training adaptation side of things, you want the muscles to be inflamed because that's when they do their adaptation.
Okay.
That's when they're able to make the structural change and become stronger. So if you're going into an ice bath each week throughout your training block or after each hard session, you're doing all the hard work and not getting as much reward as you possibly could be.
Interesting.
So there is time to use it. For example, the European Championships are on at the minute.
Yeah.
If that is your end goal and you're going between rounds of races, great, jump in because it'll make you feel better for the next day.
Yeah.
There's obviously, that is from a purely training point of view and physiological point of view. There's obviously mental adaptations that you can make, and there's physical health and feeling benefits that I don't necessarily address those because they're individual to each person.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Recovery is simple. You need to be sleeping a lot, and very difficult for people, especially with like yourself with children, and with the impact of work and family on lives and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a really, really good study out there that shows that from 5 hours to 8 hours sleep, for every hour extra you get, you reduce your injury risk by something like 25%.
Wow. Okay.
So the more sleep you can get, that's when again your body does most of its chronic adaptation to make you fitter and stronger. You need to be fueling correctly. 3 meals a day minimum, having the correct protein intake, but also carbohydrate. Again, something that a lot of athletes and a lot of people don't do because, there is this rhetoric again that goes out there, carbs make you fat. Yeah, overconsumption of all things makes you, bigger. You need to be replenishing glycogen stores. You can do certain bits where you like... you'd use recovery tights, or you can use massage guns, etc. I would see all those as like supplementary things. If you're sleeping well, hydrating well, and eating well around your training, you should be recovering. But then also having a really sensible training plan that takes in the demands of your life as well.
Yeah.
If you're struggling to recover from workouts, well, you're probably just training too hard. So chill things out a little bit, let your body adapt, and then go again.
Yeah, I think naturally you want to push yourself. Most people want to push themselves, and it's like sometimes there's that tipping point, I suppose, where you push yourself too much.
It's knowing when is the right time to go and when is the right time to pull back.
Yeah, we'll come on to some questions because we put out some stuff on social media, and we've got some questions from different people. But that's interesting about recovery because I ice bath after my long run.
Yeah. So you might not be getting as much adaptation from it.
I ice bath after my long run because I feel like I've just done a half.
Yeah.
And I know I need to go and do a 40-minute easy run on Tuesday. So Sunday morning to Tuesday morning or Tuesday evening, probably Tuesday evening.
Yeah.
There's not that much time, 2-3 days. So it's like I've wanted to make sure that I'm as fresh as I can be. And also I always do 1 or 2 a week just because there's times where if there's a lot of stress going on or if there's things that happen, I'll jump in there because I don't like water. Can't swim. Going in there, dunking your head under and sitting in 2, 3, 4 degrees for X amount of minutes is a challenge. And actually that's probably my biggest challenge of the day. So if I've done that, then all the other shit is just all the other shit. I'll just deal with it. So for me, there's a mental part of it. But I did think that there was a better physical benefit.
No. I mean, locally, almost in terms of week to week, you'll probably perform better on your Tuesday run.
Yeah.
But you are hampering your adaptation from Saturday to
Right,
Tuesday.
okay.
So, looking over a longer period of time, 8 to 12 weeks, you're probably having less adaptation.
Yeah.
But then, as again, like, this is the beauty of like what we do at PGC1. Not only are we working with an elite athlete where that'd be super important, but as more recreational athlete, it's not just about what physically works.
Yeah.
It's about how does that athlete tick? And for
Yeah.
if you say to me as the athlete, well, I really love ice bathing and I find it super beneficial to all parts of my life, I'm not going to tell you no.
Yeah.
Yes, the science might not necessarily be 100%, but if it makes you feel good, then
that might be
the
same
brain's,
as
the most important muscle, as we've identified with the running anyway. So, I would, say, right, well, let's use those ice baths to the maximum advantage. When is the right time to use that in the week?
Okay. Yeah.
In order to get the most out of yourself and still adapt to your training.
It's that bespoke nature of
exactly.
advice, I suppose. Okay, well, look, go on to some questions. So, Raj on Facebook messaged and said he wants to try to plan to get under 5K. How would he go about it?
As in under a time? Or
under 20 for 5K.
Under 20 for 5K. Yeah. So simplify it right back. How many times a week can you run? You need to be getting kind of some runs that are over 5K in duration or distance. You need to be working at getting some speed underneath that 20-minute marker, and plan out from there really. Obviously, there's lots of subtle differences depending on how much time the athlete can commit. But I would be looking at very simply one easy aerobic run, 30 to 40 minutes, just getting the fitness going. One run kind of longer, 45 maybe to 60 minutes, to give that kind of chronic overloading physiological adaptation, and then 1 to 2 runs where you're working at that 20-minute 5K pace. So maybe split it up into, right, I'm going to run 5 by 4 minutes at 4 minutes a K, or I'm going to actually do 3 by 7 minutes at a lower intensity, but build my aerobic fitness up. But I'm actually then going to finish that off with some 30-second reps much faster.
Okay.
So that's kind of how
it's
I
mixing up the kind of long stuff with the easy stuff with some stuff that's at the pace that you need to be going at some point.
You probably, over a 2-week cycle, run your 5K pace at least once to twice, run quicker than it at least once to twice, and run slower than it at least once to twice.
And if over what time period?
Depending on your starting point, but training, I would say, you're always 3 weeks behind with any training adaptation. So minimum, you need to be looking at having at least 6 to 8 weeks training block before you want to be trying to go again over a certain distance.
Okay. Somebody else has said about stretching.
Yes.
So this is, Carl on Instagram. How important is stretching for runners?
Pre-exercise, it's not important at all. There were some really good studies done in the kind of 80s and 90s on the impact of static stretching on sports performance. It has no bearing on sports performance. So
that's against a lot of the stuff you see on social media, isn't it? Because a lot of it you see, you've got to do certain stretches, get your body warmed up and all this sort of stuff. Yeah,
so you don't need to do that, but afterwards it's really good, or can be really good again for recovery and keeping the range of motion in there. The most important thing is active mobility, so it's getting the body moving. So a lot of us have office jobs where we sit down, or driving jobs, you sat down, you shorten your hamstrings. So before you start doing any physical activity, right, how can I get some movement and blood flow back through the hamstring and all of the tight spots that I've got? So we always ask people to do some 4 walking mobility drills. So it's super simple, like knee to chest, some kind of ankle flushes for the hamstring, just some A drills, so getting the knee driving up and down, and then kind of getting the ankles moving as well.
So it's not so much as stretching, it's more just general mobility stuff.
Yeah, mobility and activation. It is kind of, that's the most important part for kind of a general easy run. When you're kind of warming up for something more intense, we go for a ramp protocol. So that's raising the pulse, so doing some easy level aerobic stuff just to get the blood flowing. Yeah. Then you activate and mobilise the muscles, and then you'll potentiate them by putting them under a hard stress. So that would be where you might see athletes do strides, or the most potent example or poignant example is when you see footballers come out after half time. That the S&C coach puts those little cones there, and they do those silly little sprint drills and then sprint on. That's potentially differentiation. So you put the muscle under kind of a minute amount of stress, and actually they super compensate and then able to take more capacity.
Okay.
So for a harder effort, you would do something like that. So you might then do like 3 or 4 by 10 to 15 seconds, getting your legs turning over, have some recovery, then start your session.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. And Kim on Facebook said she's just started running.
Yeah.
What's the biggest bit? It's quite a general question. What's the biggest bit of advice you would give to her as a starter?
Follow your own journey. Don't, with running, because I think it's such an individual sport and you spend a lot of time on your own, you outwardly look to other people. Well, what's that person doing with their running journey? We spoke, at the start of this where, Scott Cross, PGC1, legend.
Yeah.
You said you started running, you looked at Cross's runs. Oh, what is he doing?
Yeah.
Actually, Cross's got his own stuff. He's done his own journey. You got to focus on your journey.
Yeah.
Where are you at with your running? What is your reason that you're doing your running?
Yeah.
And where do you want to go? And just stay on that journey and stay in your own bubble. Because comparison towards others, you don't necessarily know what they're getting up to. You don't know what their life's like.
Yeah.
All it does is make it even harder and harder for you to go and achieve your own personal goal. Yeah. So just stay focused on your own journey.
Similar to a lot of things,
and how you
isn't it?
week on week making yourself better and getting closer to that goal.
I think the same as anything with social media, the way you look. You look at social media and everybody is fitter, better looking than you are, ripping 6 and 8 packs and stuff, and you look at it and you're like, maybe I'm not up to scratch. And I think social media has got a lot of good stuff in it, but I think that also gives you a warped sense of actual reality because they're just giving you a shop window of what they're about. It's a bit like a CV applying for a job. That CV is going to be the best version of them because that's their window. Yeah. It's not going to be the consistent version of them. It's going to be the best of everything. See what I mean? So, okay, that's cool. And then the last question then is David on LinkedIn messaged and said about marathon time. So he can run just over 4 hours for a marathon at the minute. He wants to get under 3:30. What tips would you give him?
So the biggest thing, kind of getting from that 4-hour bracket into the 3:30s, you want to be developing your longer run. So just by virtue of going out and running more, running is a skill. You will get better and better. That's not to say you've got to go and suddenly double your weekly mileage, sustainably increase the amount you're doing, but also introduce kind of some shorter effort races as well. Raise your ceiling, because the faster you can run for 5k, the faster that it will allow you to run for 10k. The faster you can run for a half, raise that physiological ceiling. It will enable your body to basically cope with the marathon better. We can kind of go through into like lactate thresholds and stuff, but essentially with the marathon being like 100% aerobic kind of metabolism, essentially, you need to increase your maximal speed that you're running, only respiring aerobically. Say that that pace at the moment for is it David? Yeah. Say that pace for David is 8 minutes a mile.
Yeah.
Well, what can you do to make that 7 minutes 30 per mile? Because then everything else kind of comes up.
Falls in. Yeah. Okay.
That would be my advice.
Okay. Cool. So that's the questions over. So that's easy. In terms of what's sort of next for you and for PGC1, what do you see sort of the future looking like?
So for me now, it's about growing PGC1 to, try and reach more corners of Northamptonshire, first of all, and then, and beyond. For me personally, my ambition is I want to have taken an athlete all the way up to the Olympic Games. That's kind of my driving passion as a coach, to help swing there. But then with PGC1 specifically, help as many people as possible go and achieve their goals and be the best versions of themselves. I'm very biased, but I do feel like we've got a really, really lovely community and really great training and, coaches that are really well informed. And I just want as many people to know about that and be able to come and access that as they wish. So it's not necessarily about we need, a certain amount of numbers, we need a certain amount of people to break 3 hours for the marathon. We want as many people as possible to finish a race with a smile, knowing that they've made the best of themselves in that situation. Okay,
no, that's good, because I think a lot of businesses are, the metrics are X amount of profit, X amount, and obviously all of that is important to be able to keep the lights on and keep going as such. But having something that's more of an emotive element, which is helping people, is always always a good thing, I suppose. And so, if people are interested in getting involved with yourself, or wanted some advice, or wanted to find you somewhere, or were interested in PGC1 and wanted to kind of come along or whatever, what's the what are the steps? Where can people find you guys?
So the easiest way to get in contact is via Instagram. So PGC1 Coaching on Instagram. Send us a message, and you can also go on our website and book in a free consultation. So we, offer initial consultation completely free of charge. There's no obligation to sign up. Just to get to know you as the athlete, get to know what we can offer you as the individual. So that's kind of the first place to get in contact if you're looking for like a monthly training plan. Or a training plan for an event. If you want to help yourself and kind of train in person with us, so we do Wednesday night interval sessions every week from the athletics track in Daventry at Stephen Hill Sports Park.
Okay.
So we meet at about 6:15 on a Wednesday evening, you can come along to those sessions. There's no obligation to be part of PGC1. Just come down, get yourself on the track, and jump in and have some fun.
So what are those sort of sessions like on a Wednesday?
Hard.
Yeah.
So it's an intervals based workout. We work on essentially we want any runner to be able to come to that session and get something from it. So that's all the way from 5k runners all the way up to ultramarathon runners. I mean, one of the guys that comes on every week on a Wednesday is just done the Grand Union Canal Ultra. Ran from central London all the way to Birmingham on the Grand Union Canal.
Wow.
Crazy. I don't know why anyone wants to do that almost, but so anyone can get something from that workout. It's a hard workout. You do have to really push yourself, but it's a really, really welcoming environment. No matter the standard of the athlete, it's about everyone coming and giving it their best shot and having some fun.
How do you cater to challenge everybody? How do you cater for mixed?
So we do everything on a time basis.
Okay.
So that enables each person to get a very similar physiological output for every kind of repetition that we put in, depending on their level. So what you'll see a lot of people on the track do is they do K reps. Well, we'll take two
what's that, 2 laps?
2.5 laps.
Yeah.
So we take 2 runners, a 15-minute 5k runner and a 25-minute 5k runner. So the 25-minute one, if they're doing K reps at 5k pace, takes them 5 minutes to go. So they do that 5 times. Well, they've done 25 minutes of work. You've got your 15-minute runner. If they did 5 reps, that's 15 minutes of work. So why is the 25-minute runner doing more running than the 15-minute runner?
On there.
So we would go, well, let's do 5 by 3.5 minutes at 5k effort as the session. So everyone is getting similar output, and that's how we cater for individuals.
Okay.
We always have at least 2 coaches there anyway, so we're talking to our athletes throughout. If someone comes down and they've not done much interval training before, we have exit points throughout the session, so that they can kind of get what they need from it and then kind of get the next training in the next day. And then the aim is that you would work up over a number of weeks to kind of complete in the full workout.
So going to something like that for someone that's, say, beginning or not very confident would seem, I would say, seem quite... I'm not sure what the word is.
It's very daunting.
Yeah, a little bit daunting is the word. Yeah, a bit daunting because it's something on a track. Do you need special kit? Do you need whatever? You go in people that you don't necessarily know. So how do you guys kind of engage people to come in?
So we make it a super welcoming environment, and I think the biggest thing to remember is that everyone went to a track for the first time in their life once. Even from Mo Farah, every single athlete has had to do that once. So make that step, come along, have a chat with us. If you're nervous or unsure, drop us a line on Instagram, and we'll get people to warm up with people. We explain what's going on and just try and just help people out with knowing that it's a super welcoming environment. It's not an elitist kind of environment where you've got to perform to a certain level.
Be frowned upon if you're not running this sort of a speed.
And everyone cheers everyone on. So if your obligation as you overtake someone is to say well done to the person you're overtaking. And we're super encouraging as the coaches. Remember everyone had to go there for the first time once. And we'll try and make that kind of transition as easy as possible.
So what you're saying is come along on a Wednesday.
Get stuck in,
see how it is and see how you get on. And if anyone wants to contact you, you've got Instagram. Is there any other method that you want to put on?
Instagram and the website is probably the easiest 2 ways. So you can kind of, my email is joshua@pgc1coaching.com, email. Get in touch via the Instagram page.
Perfect. All right. Well, look, we'll make sure we tag you in anything that goes out, Josh, and if anybody wants to sort of interact with the podcast via the normal methods, even myself or podcast directly, they can, as normal, and we can put you in contact with Josh and the team if we need to. But engage directly, feel free. We'll make sure that your page is tagged in everything that we put up, and
awesome.
We'll go from there.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
No, really good, mate. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Perfect. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, mate.
Appreciate that.